Hello, I'm Christina Walker.
And I'm Gianfranco Gerbino, and today's Crash Course video is on Deng Xiaoping and the economic reform in China.
In 1978, after the death of Mao Zedong, the chairman of the People's Republic of China, Deng Xiaoping became the leader. He was a Chinese revolutionary and statesman. Although he never held office, he started market economy reforms that reached far outside of China. These economic reforms opened up China's economy to the world.
Xiaoping grew up in a peasant family and he went to school in France. There he learned about Marxism and Leninism. When he returned to China in 1923, he became part of the Communist Party. After the People's Republic was started, he became the Secretary General and became involved in the economic reforms that were started. After Mao's Great Leap Forward, where the Communist Party wanted to change China from an agriculture economy to socialism in the late 1950s, Deng was purged from the party. After Mao died in 1976, Deng took over the party and started to make changes. China's leaders had held on to communist values, but in 1979, economic changes happened that reformed the system. During the initial change, peasants were allowed to run their own farms and brought their own goods to the market. During this period, the entire country's economy opened to outsiders. The United States started to allow business between the two countries, and on January 1st, the United States recognized the People's Republic. Deng even visited the United States President Jimmy Carter in Washington, D.C. This was a sign that China's new policy was the start to economic and technological development. China even improved their relations with Japan. As Deng began to take power, his goals were to make 4 modernizations. They wanted to improve the economy, agriculture, national defense, and science and technology. Deng finally took over as chairman of the Central Military Commission in 1981.
Special economic zones opened during the early 1980s. In these areas, the government allowed a free market economy and less stringent governmental policies. These trade zones integrate trade with science, technology, and industry. Foreign companies had more appeal to do business with China, and domestic companies were able to open in these areas. The important aspect of the CEZ was that the government was not required to authorize foreign trade. The coastal cities became open to trade and advanced technology. Foreign companies that do business with China in these areas benefit from lower tax rates and less regulations. Other areas in mainland China continued to operate under the communist system.
Due to the extreme growth, China had to develop social reforms. The population was expanding rapidly, and Xiaoping continued to allow only 1 child per family. This policy was started in 1979, which provided fines for families that had more than 1 child. The policy was monitored by the local and national governments. Eventually, the policy began to be phased out in 2015.
As the economy started to open at that time, the country allowed more freedom of opinion. People in China began to criticize the People's Republic openly. Demonstrations by students were happening in the 1980s due to inequalities that were happening in China. In Beijing in 1989, there were student protests in Tiananmen Square. These protests were known as the '89 Democracy Movement.
Xiaoping felt these protests were a threat to the political system. Deng and other political elders decided to use physical force to stop the protest. They enforced martial law, and the military took over the area in an emergency situation. As students were blocking the path towards Tiananmen Square, the army with assault rifles and tanks killed several hundred civilians. The deaths have been estimated at upwards of thousands by some counts. The international community condemned the Chinese government for this event. This event became a turning point for the political expression, although the Chinese economy has been successful since. Political criticism is still limited in China. There are 5 special economic zones, along with other areas that have preferential treatment in their economic system today.
The Communist Party of China is the ruling party today. They base their system on socialism, which says that the public sector dominates the economy. Although they have a new economy, they still follow many of the terms and concepts of Marxism.